turn the record button on. Give me one moment. We'll begin at 10 after. Okay. Hello, everybody. I'm so happy to introduce our next presenter. She's the last, but certainly by no means the least, speaker of our 2018 web conference. Please welcome Annamaria Pinter, who is showcasing the United Kingdom. Dr. Annamaria Pinter is an associate professor at the Center for Applied Linguistics at the University of Warwick in the UK. She has published widely in the area of teaching English to young learners. She is the author of Teaching Young Language Learners, which its second edition published in 2017, and Children Learning Second Languages by Palgrave Macmillan. So, for the final time of this 24-hour web conference, take it away, Annamaria.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much, Joan. It's wonderful to be part of this marathon event. Thank you so much to the organizers. Thank you for including me and inviting me to do this. It's a great honor to be here, and I'm so impressed there are still 80 participants going really strong. So you can go and have a rest very soon after this now, because as Joan said, I'm the very last act today. Now, those of you who know me, you probably know that I'm not actually originally from the UK. I have lived here for about 25 years, but originally I'm Hungarian. And so I was a little reluctant to represent the UK. But actually, when I thought about it, I have been involved over the years in various projects where I have learned quite a lot about English learners in England or EAL learners in the UK. So EAL, for those of you who do not know this term, it means English as an additional language. So those children in UK schools who arrive here with another language, already speaking another language, or maybe even two languages, and basically when they put in UK schools, they need to adjust, they need to fit in, and obviously they need to learn English. So let me give you just a few quite interesting statistics. There are over 1 million pupils in formal education in England who are classified as EAL learners. So we're not talking about a very small number, we're actually talking about a large number of pupils, and this number is growing steadily. And there are 360 different home languages represented in schools, which of course means that it's an impossible job for any teacher to try and learn these languages, and that's not going to be our solution here. But these children bring an amazing variety of languages to the primary school. It's really the primary school where I'm going to focus today's talk, where I have had more experience than secondary or preschool, but occasionally I might refer to younger and older children as well. So these children are in schools mainly in major urban areas, so in London and Birmingham and Leicester and big cities. Although they're scattered everywhere, in big cities you will find more EAL learners. Generally speaking, research suggests that there are major gaps in achievement between EAL and non-EAL pupils. So when you look at stats about school leaving exams, or when you look at reading proficiency in English schools, EAL children tend to do less well. There are huge challenges in the UK in terms of supporting EAL children. There is a general lack of research. We don't actually know very much about their difficulties and their lives and exactly how they survive from day to day. There's lack of funding. So many decades ago, there was actually more funding. So when these new children arrived into the country, there were special classes, there were special assistance given to them before they joined the mainstream schools. And of course, teacher education is also lacking. An average primary school teacher doesn't really know very much about the needs of EAL children. Now, EAL is a well-known label in the UK, but in fact, EAL contains a lot of different subgroups. So, for example, we talk about established EAL children. So these might be second generation children from countries like Pakistan or India. So they've never even been to Pakistan or India, but still in their families, languages from these countries are used. So English is a second language for them. And there are new migrants from countries such as Poland or Romania. So, for example, outside the university, in the school that I'm very familiar with, there are a lot of Polish children currently. But also there are children of international students. So I have got on a master's course students who bring their families, for example, from Korea, and they put their children in the local primary school while they study at Warwick. So those children are in a similar situation, put in a school with no English at all, and they need to find some survival strategies. And these children might stay for a very short time, maybe just for a year or 2 years. If somebody's doing a PhD, maybe a bit longer. But generally speaking, they will go back to Korea or Japan or wherever they've come from. But there may well be children whose parents decide to settle here and don't go back. And of course, a very new and a very big group of new migrants are the Syrian migrants following the recent disasters that we all know about in the Middle East. Now, there are different types of primary schools when we talk about EAL children. There are some where still non-EAL pupils are the majority. So, for example, nearby to my university, there's a little school, about 200 pupils, and about maybe 20 of them are international or EAL children. So the great majority, 180 children, are still local children. And there are other schools where large proportions are EAL pupils. So also not too far from me in the city, there is a primary school where over 80% of the population is actually EAL rather than local children. And of course, even backgrounds can make a difference. So, for example, if you're a head teacher of a primary school and you get a lot of Polish children, then at least you have that strength that you can build on that. You can get someone in who speaks Polish, and you can really help those children in a targeted way. But most schools will have different backgrounds, and there might not be dominant populations in any one school. Of course, depending on which situation you are in as a head teacher or teacher, you will have to do very different things to try and help the children. Now, the support and the English language help varies a lot from school to school. In the UK, schools have their own budget. So if the school governing body is clever, they may be able to save up some money and buy in an EAL expert. So someone who has got linguistics background, who has got English as a foreign language background, who has got some background in how to help these children very well. If this is not the case, then for a bit less money, you can have access to what we call language or translation services offered by the local council. So this means someone might come out and help the children by translating their worksheets. These people may be able to come out once a week or once in 2 weeks, and they may have to help a lot of children. So individuals will not necessarily gain from this very much. And in a lot of schools, teachers try to organize withdrawal classes for small groups so that there is some one-to-one tutoring going on with children who typically EAL and fall behind. So what typically happens is there could be a scenario when a new child arrives in an English school, here in our local school, for example, and they do not speak any English at all. So the first day is always crucial. Well, we all know how difficult the first day is when we have a new job or whatever we do. Our first day is always the most difficult day. So I think schools try to understand this and help these children as much as possible by finding a little friend, by introducing these children to their teacher and allowing them to just follow the teacher around for the first day and not necessarily participate in everything that they will be in the future. The children then quickly have to learn what we call survival language. So they give them flashcards and they're told, this is how you ask to go to the toilet. This is how you ask if you're not well. This is the instruction for, take out your book. So they very quickly in the first week learn some what we call survivor language. But they also have to learn some compensatory strategies, and some of the children are extremely good at this. So, for example, when you sit in a group and you don't necessarily understand what goes on, many of the children will not immediately say, I don't understand, but wait and hope to see if they can figure it out from the context. I worked with a Korean family, and my parent participant was very, very impressed to find that her daughter used all kinds of very, very effective compensatory strategies, such as making small drawings for their friends, who then would hold the daughter's hand and play with her during the break time to try and be friendly with her. And she also tried to mimic the other children. So she wasn't always sure what she was saying, but she was going around mimicking what other people were saying so that she could immediately participate in the simplest games. Finding the friend is more crucial actually than learning the language. Of course, learning the language is very, very important, but children tend to settle down and feel comfortable if they have a friend. So schools understand this, and they take care in helping children to always have a friend around that they can play with. The children also need to understand how the school works. Some of these children come from schools in very different contexts and different parts of the world. And so the British school system will be very different. Typically in a British school, you will be allowed to choose things and go around and work in groups. And these might be completely alien to someone who comes from a more regimented primary school. But then there are also groups of children who, because of, for example, the war-torn Syrian situation, haven't been to school for several years. Or children, typically the Roma traveling children who come to UK schools, they've never actually been to school anywhere else, except that they're already 9 or 10 years old, so it would be very difficult to put them into year 1 or preschool. Accessing the curriculum, of course, is the biggest problem. You can begin to pick up language in the playground, and you can have a good time with your friend playing tick or running around in the playground, but accessing the curriculum is particularly the challenge for children who come to an English-speaking school. So, for example, they will be quite easily joining in with PE or singing or drama, but typically science or mathematics can be difficult. Although many children from Korea, for example, bring amazing mathematical ability, so it gives them a great way to succeed quickly in the maths curriculum. And then finally, your parents' English competence will be crucial. So how much your parents are able to help you, willing to help you, ask you about school and look at your homework and practice things with you that they can see you might be doing at school. So let me just talk a little bit now about some strategies that seem to work in more concrete terms. So in some of the primary schools where I have seen very happy EAL children, what have these schools done? So the first thing, very important thing, is to allow and encourage the use of the L1. So if you've got 4 or 5 Polish-speaking children in your maths class or in your literacy class, whatever it is, it's extremely important to allow those children to talk to each other, check with each other, help each other, because if one of them understands or one of them knows the answer, they can quickly explain it using their first language. Of course, it's not a good strategy to rely on just this throughout the whole year and the whole time, but on occasions where this is a quick solution, a good teacher would always allow children to conference using their L1. Put children who share the same background together some of the time. So this is the same sort of idea, really, except that in really good schools, I even saw evidence when there were new arrivals from a new context, but the school already had 2, 3 children from the same context in higher classes. Those kids were asked to come down and help out with the new children. And this works really well. This gives the children some sort of safety. And it's actually really good for those kids as well, because they get to teach something and help younger kids to learn something. That's the best way of learning, is teaching it to somebody. Celebrating first languages and cultures. So in a typical British primary school where there are lots of EAL children, you will see it everywhere on the walls, that there are displays of different posters and different information about different cultures and first languages. And then following the work of Jim Cummins, I'm sure a lot of you are very familiar with his work. I don't have time to go into the details of it, but one main idea from his work is that for bilingual education, so if you're serious about children learning a new second language, you need to encourage them to use both languages, and in fact encourage them to write in both languages. So again, in good schools, I saw this: 2 copies of the homework, 2 copies of the same story, 2 copies of poetry writing, 1 in L1 and 1 in L2. And this creates a very interesting situation where those children who do not have a second language begin to think, well, what am I going to do? Why can't I use another language? So in those schools, actually, foreign language learning for children in the UK, which typically tends to be French or German, was boosted because they saw the other EAL children using 2 languages, and they wanted to do the same. Good schools also know that you have to give children the opportunity to shine, to succeed, even if they're very low-level EAL speakers. So, for example, I had another parent I worked with who was studying with us here from China, and her 2 children were in the local school. And her daughter was an extremely shy speaker of English and didn't enjoy school very much. And then the school had this brilliant idea. They gave her the opportunity to do a small presentation in assembly about Chinese New Year, and they did. And she did it both in Chinese and in English. And of course, she prepared it and someone helped her with the English part. But because she succeeded in presenting this in 2 languages, she suddenly became very popular. Lots of children wanted to talk to her, and her confidence grew from nothing to amazing heights. So opportunity to shine and succeed is extremely important, and giving children opportunities to show off their abilities in front of the others. And then very, very good schools do not actually allow the EAL children to fall behind, but what they very cleverly do is they pre-teach them in small groups. They pre-teach them upcoming curricular content, and allow them to be more prepared when they receive that content a week later in their mainstream classrooms. So these are schools where there is resource and money to actually employ somebody who could work with these children in advance, so that they'll be the ones when the new topic is actually aired a week later. They'll be the ones who are already familiar and who are already able possibly to contribute even more than the regular children. But this is something I think that good schools manage to do, and they completely change the normal pattern, which is that EAL children fall behind and then you send them to catch-up classes. Because if you always fall behind and if you always go to catch up, you sort of end up accepting that that's where your place is. And then finally, really good schools allow EAL children to take a foreign language. Of course, the layperson's view is that they've got one language that they speak at home, first language. They really struggling to learn English, so why should we bother them with yet another language? But of course, when in a primary school French or German is introduced, everyone starts from zero. So these are actually the most rewarding opportunities for these children, because they are on the same level as everyone else. And often they end up really enjoying and doing extremely well in French or German or whatever language the school is offering. So some of you I can see in the chat box have already talked about identity text, and I'm really glad about this because this is going to be my more practical point. Most recently, I've worked with children producing identity texts or identity collages. So this is kind of part language work, part artwork, very exciting. And I think identity texts can incorporate some of the good practice that I've just talked about. So, for example, these are art-based products, but there is always language in them, and there is always language in them that represents the whole child. So if the child is bilingual, first language and English second language, or multilingual, because some children may have 3 languages, all 3 languages or 2 languages can be, and children are encouraged to use all their languages to create identity texts. And identity texts are also great because they explore who you are in a positive way. So an identity text will want to tell others about what's great about your languages, what's great about your cultures, what can you do in one language and in another, how you feel about them. And you can also illustrate it with drawings and photographs. And I will be showing you in a minute a couple of examples. I will and on some nice examples for you to take away. Now, identity texts, of course, can take a long time to draft, redraft, or finalize, but they can be also very short activities. So I will show you in a minute one where we only spend 20 minutes to create an identity product about yourself. But depending on what you want to do with them afterwards, they can be displayed publicly or they can be stored privately. It depends how the producers of these texts and artifacts feel about the product. So in some cases, teachers might want to display them, but maybe display them somewhere securely, not for the entire world. Or they may want to, children or young people even, they may want to have these stored privately because they don't want to make this available to everybody. It would really depend, I think, on the situation. And I think identity texts can be excellent research tools as well, because you can, as a teacher, you can begin to record what children say about their identity artifacts and their identity texts. And this could offer insightful commentary on their identity construction. And of course, if you're able to listen to it bilingually, if the child is able to code switch, even better, but this might not always be possible. Okay, so here is an identity text that a young girl has recently produced in one of the sessions that I ran in a primary school. So the idea was that she drew around her hand and she wrote in the different fingers various refer to various languages that she speaks and understands. And then she just basically decorated this. So you can see this is very, very basic, and this can be done in 15, 20 minutes. And then what I did was I recorded a very short conversation with her about what the different languages meant, and why she did it like this, and how she felt about her different languages. So this could be a very short activity that could be used absolutely anywhere with any group of children who have got more than one languages or cultures to reflect on. So this one is a little bit more sophisticated, but the identity side of things visually is captured as a head, or a head and a bit of the body. With younger children, you can do wonderful things. They can draw all kinds of stick figures of themselves, so it doesn't have to be as beautifully artistic as this one. But you can see that the idea is that then you draw inside the big drawing all the different activities and ideas that make you who you are. Surprisingly and rather worryingly, if you can see that in the neck area, there's a tank, and there's someone who seems to be in a prison or something. Below that, there's a pizza and more kind of neutral things. And further up, there are things about exercise, a tennis racket. You may also notice there's no language in this. In other words, no words. But you could easily add words, or again, you can easily ask the child to talk about this. Say something, give a short commentary on this. A different one that does use words and texts, and this is actually, if you look at it, you probably can't see or read it very closely, but here you have got somebody who represents herself, to my mind, as a ray of sunshine. So you're in the middle, I am, and then the various adjectives and who you are and what kind of person you are around the sun middle part. So again, in terms of identity, this is quite creative. It's different to the hand. It's different to the head. It's a little bit more abstract. It involves a lot of language. And it can be, again, something that could be worked on, turned into a description. It could be done in different languages, and it could be, developed in various ways. And finally, let me show you one more, which is perhaps the most sophisticated one, certainly in terms of language use. So this is the idea of your thumbprint, which is also, very good because it is your identity in a very different way. And you can see that this learner actually has got a lot to say, has got a lot of language to use, and organized what he or she had to say to decorate the thumb. Again, any learner anywhere, whether they're even if they're not bilingual, they can write about themselves. But I think for bilingual, bicultural learners, these activities work extremely well. In schools where head teachers and teachers take these things seriously, they will have exhibitions of bilingual texts and bilingual stories and displays and homework assignment always done in two languages. So you can really run with this, but for the identity text, I think because there's art involved and artistic expression involved, you will be amazed to see what wonderful ideas the children will come up with. If you search, by the way, on Google and you put in identity text or identity collages, or look on Pinterest, a lot of wonderful stuff comes up. So you can always inspire children you're working with some of these excellent examples from the internet. And of course, the good thing about that as well is that you don't need any further permission to show them, because if you're going to be working with real kids materials, then there is that sensitivity that's extremely important. You know, to what extent do they want to reveal perhaps very emotional stuff about themselves, so you might not be able to go very far with those. Okay, so I believe I'm kind of running out of time, so just let me show you my email address here, and please, if you want to know anything more, then just get in
Yeah,
touch.
you're right
Sorry,
on
Joan, I
time
think I have
here,
gone over.
and that's great. So if anyone has some questions, then they can feel free to email you, or if they would like the references. That was fantastic. Those examples at the end were just so
Mm,
wonderful. They were touching and also showed the creativity of young learners. So thank you so much for sharing those and for sharing all of your ideas. Um, I do,
mm,
yeah, there's so many comments here
mm.
for you and everyone.
Thank
If you
you.
can give a nice round of applause virtually for
Yeah.
Dr. Annamaria Pinter. We're so honored to have you as our final speaker for
Mm,
this amazing event. And thank you for closing it in such a wonderful and inspirational way. Thank you.
mm, mm. Thank you very much, Joan, and thank you to everyone who participated. And
Thank you
if you do
so
have questions,
much.
please send them, and
Okay,
I'll
bye
take
bye.
time
Hope to
to
see you again
answer
soon.
them.